Circuit. I hope you're well. I hope you're staying healthy in the midst of all this craziness. And as you know, we're not meeting here at the church like normal. And so what we wanted to do is, Jeremy and I got together, and we wanted to provide still a message. And over the last couple of weeks, we have been diving into Colossians, the book of Colossians. And so Sam kicked us off week 1, diving into the first couple of chapters. And then Gabby kicked us off week 2. And now Jeremy, Pastor Jeremy, we invited to come just wrap up Colossians and just really get at the heart of what Paul was writing to this group of people, this group of believers. And so I hope you find this message well. And in general, we love you guys. And so, I just want Jeremy to speak on Colossians. So Jeremy, go ahead.
All right. Yeah. Hey, Circuit. It's good to see you. Well, actually not see you. I wish I was seeing you. But to talk to you. And you've been in this series in Colossians. And Colossians is actually a pretty awesome book in the Bible because Paul is stuck in prison, and he's writing in order to encourage a group of people that he's never met. And actually, there's a lot of you that I haven't met in person. And so, as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about hey, what must have Paul felt like as he's a pastor who has this experience with Jesus and has this experience in his faith, and yet now he's writing to this group of people that he doesn't know in order to encourage them to grow in their faith. And I was thinking about you guys particularly as I was praying for you guys this morning and thinking, gosh, you're in a situation now where you can't go to school necessarily, and you're trying to learn this online kind of way of doing school. At least that's what my kids are doing right now. And just at this season of life and faith where now you're hearing this message from this pastor that you may not know as well, but I'm here, and my hope is to encourage you, like Paul is encouraging this group in the city Colossae, that I'm here to encourage you a little bit in your faith. And I love the passages that you guys have been studying. You've done chapter 1 and you've done chapter 2. And this idea of chapter 1 is what is fulfilling. Christ is the fulfillment. Jesus is the fulfillment of everything that God is, right? And they're in this culture where they have these other gods that they're worshiping. And, for some of them, it's Jesus is just another God amongst all of them. And then for the Jewish believers, the people who came from Israel, for them, it's no, but you have to follow all these rules as well. And so this new church, these new Christians are kind of wrestling with everyone's expectations on what the fulfillment of God's expectation and heart for us is. And so Paul makes that really clear, that Jesus is the fulfillment of everything that we look for. And then I loved Gabby's message last week where she's talking about hey, it's Jesus plus nothing that equals everything. It's not the good things that you do. It's not whether you're popular or not popular. It's not whether you're good at sports or music or art or math or whatever. It's none of that. It's Jesus plus nothing equals everything. And this is the message that at the end of Colossians, the last 2 chapters, Paul is trying to make really clear and make applicable for their regular life. How do you apply this idea of Jesus plus nothing in a culture that tells you either you have to do it this way with all these other gods, or you have to do it this way with all these rules? And I was thinking about you guys, and I was thinking that's not too far from the reality that you live in. That there's lots of things that want your attention, that want your worship, really. Worship is just ascribing worth to something, that all your attention goes there, right? And for that culture, there's all these other gods in the Roman world, but for us, there's all sorts of things that we could worship, right? Mm-hmm. There's things that want to grab our attention, and we want to find fulfillment in them. So it could be sports, it could be your online social media persona, right? It could be a lot of things that we almost worship like it would be a god of a sort. And Paul is saying in this, hey, that's the old way of being. That's the old concern. All that stuff is old and dead. In it, there's no life. And there's this beautiful passage in Colossians, just at the beginning, and he says, beginning of chapter 3, he says, since you have been raised with Jesus Christ, set your hearts on things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. And I think that the temptation for us is to think, oh, that's like about heaven. But it's not actually at all. It's about right here, right now, that Jesus, when we talk about things above, it's like it's this new way of being human that God wants for all of us. It's this new way where we aren't caught up in the things that want to distract our worship. We're not caught up in ascribing worth to things that won't give us real life. And so he's saying, hey, where Jesus is seated, he's Lord over all of it. Put your mind on those things. So it isn't like going to heaven someday. It's like right here, right now. It's like, how, when I go to school, do I have my mind on things that are more important than what's going on around me? How, when I'm in my sports team, do I have my heart set on things more than just winning the game or the match, but like caring for my team in such a way that they might get to meet Jesus? That is what the things above really is about. How we apply all this stuff, that Jesus plus nothing equals everything, how we apply that is how we share it and how we come against the world that tells us you have to value these things most importantly. And Jesus says, hey, all those things, those are cool, but that's not the most important thing. And so what Paul is trying to say for these new Christians is remember what the most important thing is. And actually he uses this really strong language of like put to death the old stuff. And he gives a list of kind of things that distract them in their time, and we could make our own list of all the things that would distract us. And then he goes on and articulates this new humanity all throughout chapter 3. And I love this part where he says, here there is no Greek or Jew, circumcised or uncircumcised, slave or free, but Christ is all and he is in all. And that passage is full of language that made sense back then. What he's saying is like, it doesn't matter whether you're from this place or that place. It doesn't matter whether you come from this family, socioeconomic level, or this family. It doesn't matter if your skin is this color or that color, or your language is this or that, or you're a band geek, or like I was, or a choir nerd, or like a jock, or you name it today. I'm way not cool enough to know how that all works today. But the heart is the same, is that Jesus wants to take all of that and make one people, one family. And that was really unique then, and it's also unique now because there's all sorts of ways that the world wants to divide us. There's all sorts of ways that the enemy, the Satan and the demonic forces of this that are in this world want to push us to mistrust and to dislike people for whatever reason. And Jesus is saying, hold up. God wants one family. And then he says, hey, because of that, you're God's chosen people. You're dearly loved. So wrap yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, and bear with one another, and forgive whatever sins someone has against you or that you have against one another. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues, a virtue is just a good thing. It says, put on love. And that will bind them all together in unity. And then he goes on in the last chapter, he kind of outlines how that worked in his world. So the family life in his world was all about like the father was the head, and the wife had to do whatever the father said. Children were like objects, not people necessarily. And then they had slaves. And so what the last chapter of Colossians does is actually like reorders all that and pushes the line in their culture and says, no, in God's family, the father, the man isn't the head, Jesus is the head. And because of that, then the father loves and supports his wife. And the wife loves and supports her husband. And the children love and support in the same way. And then now he talks about like household slaves and slavery and says, look, there's this slave named Onesimus, and he's going back to the city Colossae. And now Paul challenges him, welcome him not as a slave, but as a brother. And actually, Paul writes another letter called Philemon later on to tell his owner, who's named Philemon, hey, don't treat him like a slave anymore. Now he's your brother. And so like Paul is using this example of Jesus to challenge every way we think about the world. and that Christ is not only the fulfillment of everything promised, but he's above every structure that we could have, and he's the most important.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. And Circuit, we love you guys, and we care so much about you, and we want you to stay healthy, safe. Hey, if you have any concerns or any needs yourself, please feel free to reach out. But from here until further notice, we're going to be providing you content on our YouTube and on Facebook and on Instagram. And so if you want to be connected that way, feel free to subscribe or like or follow us on that. And just in general, stay connected with your small groups. Small group leaders, text your small group students. Students, text your small group leaders. Text your people in your small group. Stay connected, pray for each other, and pray for this country and this nation as we're going through a craziness of this virus, and we just want to be people who are safe and hone in on Jesus. And so that's all we have for you. Hey, we love you all, and we'll see you around. Bye.
See you guys.